Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and welcome to my astrology channel. On this video, I'm going to be talking about the lunar eclipse in Gemini, which takes place on the 30th of November. But I'm also going to be looking at many other things that come into play with this particular lunar eclipse. And those of you who may be new to what I do on my twice monthly videos, I'm going to take you a little bit deeper into the astrology, expand your kind of understanding about it, and in the process, I think, give you a sense of having a little bit more control over your life, that events aren't just coming at you. And that's what I believe about astrology anyway, that we bring a huge, or we play a huge part in the unfoldment of our destiny. So let me talk about where we're at the moment. Just before the eclipse takes place on the 30th, and in fact, I have to say, for a lot of November, it's been a very volatile astroscape. We've had a lot of influences that have been very changeable, revolutionary, no less, and these have been largely placed at the feet of planet Uranus, if a planet can have feet. So in this half, as we come towards the lunar eclipse, Uranus is a very strong player. The 17th and the 27th, this planet is very much in our midst, and that means that we're sort of seeing things that come out of left field, and also maybe having to wake up to some new ideas, which is a good thing. Uranus is the awakener, and a lot of the breakthroughs we get in life are to do with this planet. But it's very unsettling too, and all sorts of plans have to get changed because of Uranus. And as we've seen, especially in regard to the American election, my goodness, there have been a lot of changes and unexpected things going on, and things coming out of left field all the time. And that's been very reflective of Uranus. But another player that's very important is planet Neptune. And on the 29th of November, the day before the lunar eclipse, Neptune is stationary direct. And whenever a planet is stationary, it becomes sort of super powerful. Its properties are very much more present. Now, Neptune has been in retrograde since late June, June the 23rd. And during these 5 months, there have been subtleties developing in all kind of Neptunian situations. Now, it's not that the situations have necessarily changed radically while Neptune has been on a backward roll, but there are different nuances about it. And I think here about the idea of marinating a piece of chicken or a fish. It's still, a fish, it's still a chicken, but you're introducing new flavors and giving it a new texture. And that's what happens when a planet moves retrograde, well, an outer planet like Neptune, is that situations are subtly changing, even without your noticing. And particularly with Neptune, which is a great kind of concealer, a mirage maker, a shape shifter. We don't necessarily know what's really been going on in these 5 months, but lo and behold, as Neptune turns direct, we're going to start to see a whole lot of things that are unfolding in their reality. And that's very much to do with events on the world stage as it is in our own life. It's the same process, one in the outer and one a little bit more personally. Now, the other thing I really want to talk about, although I should mention, I want to keep with Neptune just for a minute, because after the lunar eclipse, in fact, on the in the week of the 7th of December, messages or those incidents related to Neptune are going to be really brought out by connections to the Sun and Mercury. So what I've just mentioned about things coming to light, all sorts of processes and situations, and at the same time being very confusing, because that's not what you expected to hear or what you expected to know, we can expect the week of the 7th of December to be characterized by that kind of theme. But yes, on to eclipses. I think it's important to know why eclipses happen, because they play into our understanding about what eclipses mean. And eclipses take place on the nodes, the nodal axis, and that is astronomically, the moon's nodes, where the moon intersects, or the moon's path intersects with the sun's path, it's there that eclipses take place. And when we think about the north node and the south node, these are not planets, they're points, but they have a lot to do with our destiny. They have a lot to do with karma and destiny, our past and our future. And in May of this year, the North Node moved into Gemini, and it's going to work its way through Gemini through until the early part, the January of 2022. But this next year and the 6 months that have just passed, Geminis have been at the forefront of perhaps a very powerful change. And the opposite sign, Sagittarius, is also in that same bracket. And there's a whole other group of people who find, or who will find, that this North Node in Gemini and the eclipses that occur on the Gemini-Sagittarius axis are super important to their lives and to their future. And I'm putting these dates on the contents part of my YouTube channel here, so you don't have to quickly note them down, but I'm going to say them now, and you'll of course respond if it happens to be your year. But you were born with the North Node in Gemini if you were born in between 1927 to 28, 1946 to 47, 1964 to 65, 1983 to 1984, 2001 to 2002. And if you have the North Node in Sagittarius, which of course is also very important to this eclipse cycle, you would have been born in 1918-19, 1936-37, 1955-56, 1973 to 1974, 1992 to 1993, and 2011 to 2012. So why do I say this is an important 18 months starting from May of this year, 2020, through to January of 2022? It's important because of the effect the nodes have in the sense of destiny, and the same way with eclipses. These events bring about seemingly destined events. And this 18-month period for the groups that I've mentioned is a time when things play into life that show you or help you fulfill your destiny. And it's also another way to look at this is that you get aligned or realigned to your true path. Now, this is particularly so for Geminis and those with the North Node in Gemini. For those of you who are Sagittarians, or you have your North Node in Sagittarius, what's happening here because of the South Node's association with what happened in the past? What's done? What you don't need this time round? What tends to happen on these eclipses you are able to realign yourself with the right path, because somehow you slipped back. You've gone or taken the path of least resistance, and you now need to be a little bit focused on what it is you need to do. There are elements of your past coming back to play into the present, and these are things you need to process, get over, and move forward. Now, one of the things that I want to look at here is the relationship of this lunar eclipse with the new moon of May the 22nd. Remember, this is my little pet theory, the idea that the new moon in a sign has a relationship with the full moon in its sign, which is approximately 6 months later. So that the events that happen around the time of the new moon, that's towards the end of May and also through until about the 5th of June this year, they have a relevance and a part to play in the events that are happening around the 30th of November and on really through until about the 14th of December. There's a kind of beginning and end here, and you may be able to see quite clearly what began then and what's finished now, or you may have to remind yourself of what was going on at the time and see what connections you can make. But the process, because as with all full moons, they are about closure and completion, and I'll talk about that in a minute, it's appropriate to tie something up at this point. So let's look at this in a little bit more of a dynamic way by looking at Donald Trump's chart, because he is a Gemini. Here's the sun in Gemini. and he has his North Node in Gemini. And I want to illustrate this in two ways. First of all, the full moon eclipse, which we're coming up to on the 30th of November, is a time of closure and completion for him. It's writ large in his Gemini star, so to speak. But I also want to look back and see, in his case, 6 months ago, that period from about the 22nd of May to the 5th of June, and see what was happening. Now, I've talked about on previous videos and also on my Friday Bites on my website that this period of time for Donald Trump was a window of opportunity. It was time to change tactics, and especially with the election in view in November, 6 months until that point, now was the time to have a look at what needed to be done to win the election. And there were certain opportunities for him to change tactics and so go on a direct path, if you like, to winning this election. What happened at that time? Well, towards the end of May and in that early part of June, the coronavirus was ravaging America. And, the ability of Donald Trump at that point to maybe address the people of America in terms of, or with compassion and with understanding, really in an attempt to try to manage the virus instead of perhaps dismissing it and trying to avoid any kind of connection to it whatsoever. And the other thing that was hugely important around that time, and we're looking at the 25th of May, because on that date, George Floyd died at the hands of a policeman. And of course, that spawned the Black Lives Matter movement and the huge amount of protests and unrest and upset that really have characterized this last 6 months. So here too was a window of opportunity for Donald, because at this time, instead of fighting fire with fire, so to speak, and getting very aggressive, about the situation, the thing to do was to address the grievances of the people who felt aggrieved. And I think by doing both those, or taking both those courses, shifting his course at that time, we might have had a very different election result. But of course, having said that, and let me come back to me alone here, can we escape our fate? I mean, there is seemingly a whole process of fate and destiny at work in our lives. I've just been talking about it, fulfilling our destiny, being aligned with our true path. But here's the thought. That phrase, character is destiny. And that's really perhaps almost more important than anything else, because we shape our lives by our character and by the decisions we make and the actions we take. And in a way, when we look back at the Donald Trump and we think about the election and what happened, and I'm here saying that was a window of opportunity that should have been taken, was it fate always to have the election turn out this way? On the other hand, if character is destiny, and we're looking at it at that point, with that kind of level of consciousness and willingness to change and look at new courses to take, that would have altered the course of the election. So these two principles are definitely interwoven here. So let me look a little bit about the idea of what happens at a full moon, and certainly what happens at an eclipse. At full moon, the sun and the moon are at opposite points in the zodiac. They are as far away as they possibly can be. So you can see that things have been stretched and stretched and stretched until there's no more they can go. They're at their limits. This is where we get the idea of closure and completion with a full moon, and the idea of something being done and dusted. Now, at that point, as soon as you've hit the full moon, we're in a waning cycle. And the cycle is coming back to new moon a couple of weeks later, when the whole process starts again. The ebbs and flows of the tide, the ebbs and flows of situations, the ebbs and flows of life are imitated or reflected by this full moon cycle. And of course, when you get a lunar eclipse, and then you get a solar eclipse, which is a new moon eclipse, the idea of closure and completion, of being done and dusted, of massive endings, is really writ large. much. It's on stereophonic sound. And the same with a solar eclipse, a new moon that is eclipsed. The same kind of principle. The properties given to an eclipse are super powerful. So another thing I wanted to look at here was the idea also of other signs that are perhaps front of the queue when it comes to what this lunar eclipse means. And that is Pisces and Virgo. For these two signs, this lunar eclipse is on the direction of the life direction axis. So on the one hand, we have things related to the home, to the family, to the foundations of life, the roots of life, and the foundations of the future. And on the opposite side, we have this idea, or the 10th house, as it were. We have career, status, the material world, things we're trying to bring into reality. So this lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse to follow is going to have an effect on these two areas of life, particularly for Pisces and Virgo. Let's also look at Gemini and Sagittarius in a little bit more detail. This is really the axis of the individual, the me, versus relationship, the we. So it's that balance between the two. And for some Sagittarians, this is all about the idea of relationships and the twists and turns of relationships, endings and beginnings. And really for Gemini, this is about gaining independence from a relationship, not necessarily by breaking up a relationship and not having it anymore, although it could be, but more the idea that you're still an individual within a twosome. So let me just check my notes here in case I've missed anything, but no, I think I seem to have covered most things. And what I want to do is wrap up here, because I think, well, there are two things that are important here. Not only that we have the lunar eclipse on the 30th of November, but it is coming up to the solar eclipse on the 14th of December. And I want to switch back to Donald Trump's chart for the moment, because this is very important for him. And if we look here, that total solar eclipse on the 14th of December is going to fall on his moon here, which is also in the 4th house of home and family. Now, you might say when you have a lunar eclipse on your natal moon in the 4th house, that this might be an indication you're going to change residence. So I think we might get a clue here that the White House is no longer going to be a residence for Donald Trump. On the other hand, when we look at this, we can see too, this is a solar eclipse. This is a new moon. This is a new beginning. And of course, coming to the end of a pattern of life, you do begin a whole new pattern of life. So we see that and we know that will be the case. But I'm looking at this sort of differently as well, because I think this solar eclipse, and it's a total solar eclipse, doesn't just point to a new beginning, but a new beginning of really spectacular proportions. And I would also think of it almost as a rebirth as well. So I certainly think this solar eclipse tells us we have not seen the end of Donald Trump. And I wouldn't be surprised to hear him saying in a speech between now and that total solar eclipse, "I'll be back." So let me come back again, back into the room. And yes, now I'll wrap up a little. The point about this eclipse, and I've mentioned various themes that it brings with it, is also this sense that we often feel up against fate at eclipses. The events that seem to coincide with an eclipse are those that we think we couldn't have done anything about them. They're acts of nature. There are decisions that companies and other people may make, and we're just a cog in the wheel. And we feel that we are subjected to events we didn't want to happen, or maybe subjected to events that we are delighted have happened. We've been shunted into the spotlight of life. Great things have happened to us because eclipses are like that. However, there's always a shadow. to an eclipse. And that means that even in the events of great and good things, there's a shadow to be found that needs to be borne in mind. And I suppose you could also say with a lunar eclipse, there is it a shadow? There's a new moon coming into brightness, as it were. So shadows are part and parcels of eclipses. And what do they hold in the shadows? What do we see emerging from the shadows? But in reference to how kind of active we can make our eclipses and what we can take from them, is this idea that maybe things do happen to us that we didn't want or we didn't expect, and that we don't think have anything to do with anything we've done. But there will be a thread, and we need to look at the thread that links us to what's happened to us, and there will be one. And it's in examining that and in learning from it, and then going forward with that hindsight, that wisdom, that is the purpose, if you like, of the eclipses. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. And to all of us are on a journey. There isn't any one of us on this planet that isn't on a journey. And unless we're about to shuffle off this mortal coil, we have not yet finished our journey. There is so much more to learn. No matter how old we are, no matter what our circumstances in life, we've got lots to learn. And it is these eclipse points, these very powerful configurations we get from time to time, that take us to those crossroads and force us to think, where is the thread between what's happened and myself? And in examining that, we make great strides. We get a little further along our journey. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to my next video with you. And in the meantime, there'll be more monthly videos, and of course another one in 2 weeks' time. Bye for now.